Welcome to the debate. So here is a pretty jarring truth for you. Most medical practices that go bankrupt and close their doors, they don't actually fail because of bad medicine.
Right.
They fail because of bad operations.
It's a really striking premise, and it's drawn directly from the Corentics Academy material we're looking at today, specifically their lesson, Healthcare Operations 101.
Yeah, it's from that whole Beyond Patient Care with Corentics podcast curriculum.
Exactly. And it completely shifts our focus away from, the brilliance of a clinical diagnosis, and it shines the spotlight directly onto the administrative machinery that's just kind of humming in the background.
And that machinery is exactly what we are dissecting today. We are looking at the really interesting relationship between clinical care and this invisible engine of healthcare operations.
The central question we have to grapple with here is, can medical excellence actually succeed without strong business operations?
Right. And fundamentally, does the relentless drive for operational efficiency ultimately improve, or does it, harm the human patient experience?
It might just be the defining tension of modern medicine. On one hand, you have the deeply human, vulnerable element of healing, and on the other,
the spreadsheets.
Right. The cold operational realities that are just, required to keep a clinic functioning at all.
Well, for my part, I will be arguing that strong business operations are the absolute prerequisite for clinical excellence.
Shocker.
Hey, I firmly believe that operational efficiency doesn't just, support the practice financially. It directly protects patient safety.
Okay, but at what cost?
By removing chaos from the equation, rigorous operations significantly improve the human experience. Without the engine running perfectly, the vehicle goes nowhere. No matter how skilled the physician behind the wheel is.
Fair enough. And I will be arguing that while, yes, basic systems are obviously necessary to keep the lights on, we all know that, hyper-focusing on operational efficiency carries a massive, often hidden cost.
A hidden cost?
Yes. When we enforce rigid business key performance indicators, or KPIs, and we just relentlessly standardize workflows, we risk commoditizing patient care.
I think that's a bit extreme, but go on.
Well, when we start treating the unpredictable art of healing like a manufacturing process, we fundamentally degrade the human experience and lose the essence of medicine itself.
All right, let me start by laying out exactly why I see operations as the protective bedrock of patient care. The source material presents a concept that I find just undeniable, which is that clinical skill is rendered entirely useless if the operational system fails to deliver it.
The delivery mechanism, right?
Exactly. The text states explicitly that, quote, workflow is patient safety. And, this isn't some abstract management theory. Think about the very real examples they provided.
The wait times.
Yeah. When operations break down, a diabetic patient waits 3 weeks for a vital follow-up appointment that their body simply can't afford. Or a psychiatric patient goes 10 days without a medication that keeps them stable.
Which is terrible, obviously.
And all because a prior authorization process just lacked a clear owner in the back office. The best doctor in the world cannot help a patient if the system fails to connect them.
Look, I certainly don't dispute that operational delays cause immense patient harm. No one wants a psychiatric patient waiting 10 days for stabilizing medication.
Right.
My concern lies with the overarching philosophy here, and really the language that this hyper-operational mindset forces upon us.
What do you mean by the language?
Well, treating the patient encounter as a business revenue cycle, or describing the patient journey as a strict operational relay race. It fundamentally misunderstands the nonlinear, often very messy nature of human healing.
But let's look at what that relay race actually represents in practice. Standardizing what the material calls the 11 stages of the patient journey.
From discovery to retention.
Exactly. Everything from a patient first discovering the clinic online, to scheduling, to intake, all the way to long-term retention. That is precisely what allows a talented individual clinician to function as a reliable organization.
A reliable machine, you mean?
No, an organization that can scale that incredible care to hundreds of patients consistently, and crucially, without the whole thing collapsing into chaos and burning out the staff.
You're calling it a safety net, but let's actually look at what that net is made of.
The material itself contains warnings about forcing complex human needs into these rigid operational boxes.
They're not rigid boxes, they're frameworks.
A metaphor shapes how you treat the people within it, though. When you view patient care merely as a series of handoffs between departments, from scheduling to intake to clinical visit to billing, you're assuming that a patient's health is a linear progression.
Easy linear progression through a clinic's physical space.
But you are turning a vulnerable person into a widget on an assembly line.
I have to admit, when you put it like that, treating the patient as a widget or a friction point, it does sound incredibly dystopian.
Because it is.
But we have to look at what the operational baton actually is in this relay race. The baton isn't just a piece of plastic. It is the patient's clinical data, their history, and their dignity.
Sure, data's important.
If the scheduling department doesn't securely and accurately pass that baton to the intake department, the doctor at the finish line is basically running blind. The strict mapping of those 11 stages prevents patients from falling through the cracks.
Assuming they fit the map.
Let's look at stage 11, patient retention. The text points out that without a standard operating procedure for automated recall, abnormal lab results simply disappear.
Which is a huge liability.
Yes, a patient needs a 3-month follow-up for an irregular biopsy, but nobody calls them because there was no operational trigger, and they develop late-stage cancer. If you don't map the journey, you drop the baton.
Dropping the baton is a failure, yes, I agree. But what happens to the patient who doesn't fit neatly into the mapped stages?
Give me an example.
Okay, let's say a patient arrives at stage 5, the intake phase. According to standard operating procedures, they are handed a digital intake form on a tablet that they are supposed to have finished before seeing the doctor.
Pretty standard.
Right, but this human being is overwhelmed. Perhaps they are experiencing a trauma response, or they simply lack the health literacy to articulate their complex, radiating chronic pain into the standardized drop-down menus provided by the software.
Well, the standard screeners for depression or anxiety, those are there to ensure the provider has a baseline to work from. It's about diagnostic efficiency.
But the operational machine doesn't see a person struggling with literacy or trauma. It flags them as a delay, a bottleneck in your relay race.
That's a bit cynical.
It's realistic. The front desk staff, who are being measured and managed based on their throughput efficiency, are suddenly pressured to rush the patient. The patient is no longer a person in pain, they have become an operational friction point. That is commoditization.
Okay, but the friction you're describing actually occurs because the operation wasn't functioning at a high enough level to begin with.
How so?
If stage 5 intake was handled via patient portal well before the visit, in the comfort of the patient's home, where a family member could help them, they wouldn't be rushed in the waiting room.
Assuming they have internet access and a tech-savvy family member.
Having a highly standardized path doesn't eliminate human empathy. It creates the physical and mental space for it. Think about the reality of a chaotic front desk.
Okay.
If the receptionist isn't frantically searching for a missing insurance card or trying to decipher a broken schedule, they actually have the emotional bandwidth to recognize a patient who's struggling with a tablet and offer a kind word. Structure absorbs the chaos so the human staff can actually be human.
I understand the theory that structure creates space for empathy. I really do. But the reality is that the saved time is rarely used for empathy.
What is it used for then?
It is almost always used to increase volume. And that brings us to the operational schedule itself. The source material refers to the calendar as the practice's, quote, most valuable real estate.
It is.
Listen to that language, real estate. The emphasis is entirely on maximizing slots, driving down no-show rates, and filling every possible gap. Because, as the text notes, an empty slot is revenue that can never be recovered.
Which is financially factual. I mean, a doctor's time is a perishable asset.
It is a financial fact, sure. But what does it do to the clinical reality? Treating the schedule as real estate creates an environment where providers are just constantly rushed.
Not if it's scheduled correctly.
Imagine a clinician has a 15-minute slot for a routine follow-up. During that visit, the patient breaks down crying, revealing a complex, life-threatening issue, maybe severe suicidal ideation.
Which happens.
Right. And the clinician obviously takes the time to stabilize the patient. But the operational system acts as a punisher for this. The schedule backs up, the KPIs flash red, and the clinician is penalized for doing exactly what their medical oath demanded.
Okay, wait.
The text claims operations prevent burnout, but this relentless pressure to maximize the real estate of the calendar is exactly what crushes the souls of healthcare providers today.
You're highlighting a very real nightmare scenario, but you are completely conflating having a schedule with having a bad schedule.
A schedule is a schedule.
No, it's not. The operational solution to the exact problem you just described is built right into the source material. The text explicitly calls out the danger of overbooking.
But the financial incentive.
Let me finish. The prevention mechanism is building appointment templates that genuinely match the complexity of the visit. If leadership books a 15-minute slot for a patient with severe, complex psychiatric needs, that is an operational failure. An accurate, respected template protects the provider's time.
But the relentless drive for efficiency inherently pressures clinic leadership to tighten those templates over time. 15 minutes becomes 12. 12 becomes 10.
Okay, but if you're listening to this, you've probably been that patient in the waiting room. You arrive on time, but you sit there for 45 minutes past your appointment slot, watching the front desk frantically type on a keyboard while the doctor is chronically behind.
We've all been there.
And you feel anxious, ignored, and disrespected. That isn't a failure of medicine. That is a catastrophic failure of operations. Refusing to implement and stick to structured scheduling out of some romanticized idea of, non-linear medicine. That's what causes waiting room anxiety. Chaos hurts patients. An accurate template protects their dignity.
Look, waiting 45 minutes in a sterile room is terrible, I agree. But why is the doctor so chronically behind in the first place?
Because of bad scheduling operations.
No, it's usually because the practice is trying to squeeze way too many patients into a single day just to hit their financial targets. The structure you're defending is entirely subservient to the revenue cycle.
And the revenue cycle is where the survival of the practice actually lives or dies. We cannot shy away from the harsh reality presented in the material here.
Which is?
A medical practice can be incredibly busy, seeing 30 patients a day, providing excellent care, and still go totally bankrupt.
Right, because the care isn't being properly monetized.
Because the administrative engine is leaking fuel everywhere. Let's look at the mechanics of this. The text notes that up to 40% of claims can be denied simply due to skipped insurance verification at stage 3.
Which is a training issue.
How does that happen? A front desk worker miskeys an insurance group number by a single digit. The patient sees the doctor, receives great care, and goes home.
And then the bill comes.
Right, weeks later, the billing software submits the claim, and a clearinghouse algorithm auto-rejects it because of that one digit. The practice gets paid $0. Suddenly, a staff member has to spend an hour on hold with an insurance company just to get the clinic paid for care that was already delivered.
And that is a failure of basic business viability, which I have always acknowledged we need. Obviously, you have to verify insurance.
But it is much more than just basic viability. It is a moral imperative. Diligent revenue cycle management, scrubbing claims, working those denials every single day, and tracking what are called timely filing windows.
Which are the strict deadlines insurance companies set to submit a bill.
Exactly. If you miss a timely filing window by a single day, the insurance company legally owes you nothing, regardless of how life-saving the care was.
True.
If the finances collapse because leadership thought eligibility verification or claims scrubbing was too corporate or too rigid, the clinic's doors close. 0 patients are helped. The clinical excellence you value so highly just disappears from the community entirely. Therefore, robust financial operations are the truest, most essential defense of patient care.
Solvency is essential. I won't argue that. You cannot heal patients if the clinic is closed and the doctors are unemployed. But we have to look at the psychological shift that occurs when leadership becomes completely obsessed with a KPI dashboard to maintain that solvency.
It's just measuring performance.
Let's examine the metric of revenue per provider, which the text specifically recommends monitoring.
It is simply a metric to spot workflow gaps or documentation issues between different providers in the same clinic.
On a spreadsheet, yes. But in the real world, when clinical staff are measured and judged by their financial output, a subtle but profound shift occurs in the culture of the practice.
I don't see it that way.
Think about it.
If a provider knows their primary evaluation from leadership is based on their revenue per provider and their clean claim rates, it incentivizes prioritizing easily billable, high reimbursing encounters.
That's a huge assumption about doctors' ethics.
It quietly discourages taking on deep, time-intensive, complex patients who might require lower reimbursing care or more administrative follow-up. The clinician, consciously or not, starts looking at the patient not as a human being with an illness, but as a unit of relative value, a diagnosis code attached to a dollar amount. That is the very definition of commoditizing the human experience.
I hear the concern, I really do. But let's break down what those metrics actually represent mechanically. Take charge capture, for instance.
Okay.
The material notes that missed charge capture is silent, ongoing revenue loss. For our listeners, charge capture is simply the process of making sure the doctor actually records the codes for the specific care they just provided.
Right, checking the right boxes.
If a dermatologist removes a suspicious mole but forgets to check the specific digital box for that exact surgical procedure in the chart, the practice just gave away that surgical care for free. Tracking that metric doesn't mean you view the patient as a dollar sign. It means you respect the grueling work the clinician just performed enough to ensure they are compensated for it.
But the pursuit of capturing every single charge transforms the dynamic. The material also tells us that the patient is increasingly becoming one of the largest payers due to high-deductible health plans.
Which is just the reality of modern insurance.
Yes, but it strongly advises collecting payments at the time of service, at the front desk, because it's more effective than billing them later.
It is more effective.
When the front desk becomes a point-of-sale terminal, before the patient is even allowed to enter the exam room, the therapeutic alliance is compromised. The patient feels like a consumer in a transaction, not a patient seeking sanctuary.
Wait. The text explicitly says to train and script that collection process with warmth. It notes that it is far kinder to accurately collect a known copay up front than to send a confusing surprise bill for hundreds of dollars weeks later.
A bill is a bill.
Financial transparency is a form of patient care. But, this actually brings us to how this entire system is evolving. And I think looking at the future trends outlined in the material really highlights the divide in our perspectives here. Let's discuss the role of technology and automation in the human experience.
Oh, this is precisely where my concern about the human experience reaches its absolute peak.
I thought you'd say that.
The material outlines a future heavily reliant on automated patient portals, virtual remote teams, and ambient AI.
Which I believe is the most exciting development for patient care in a decade.
We are looking at the exact same tools and seeing entirely different futures. Healing is profoundly relational. When you replace human front desk interactions with an automated digital portal,
it's an option, not a replacement.
Or when you outsource your scheduling and intake to a remote virtual assistant halfway across the country who doesn't know the community, you are stripping away the human touch.
You're romanticizing the front desk.
The front desk often initiates the healing process. It's the receptionist recognizing that a regular patient looks unusually pale today, or offering a sympathetic smile to a nervous teenager. A digital portal doesn't smile.
True.
A portal doesn't read body language or sense fear. Distancing the patient from compassionate, in-person connection by hiding behind automation fundamentally alters what it means to seek medical care.
I strongly challenge that interpretation of how the technology is actually deployed in a modern practice. The text makes a brilliant point here. Automating rules-based work doesn't replace the human. It removes the robotic tasks from your human staff.
By forcing the patient to do the robotic tasks themselves through a portal.
No, by freeing the human staff to actually be present. Think about what we are automating. Eligibility checks, claims scrubbing, appointment reminders.
Okay.
Is there profound therapeutic value in a front desk worker spending 3 hours on hold listening to elevator music while waiting for an insurance representative to verify benefits?
Of course not.
No. If software automation handles the verification instantly in the background, the front desk worker in the clinic can actually look that nervous teenager in the eye when they walk in. They aren't staring at a dual monitor setup trying to type in a 15-digit insurance ID without making a typo.
You are assuming the practice uses that newly saved time for empathy rather than just reducing headcount to save money or cramming more patients into the schedule to boost the revenue per provider.
Let's look at the clinical side. where the technology directly impacts the doctor-patient relationship. The tech spends time on ambient AI.
Right.
For those unfamiliar, this is software that securely listens to the conversation during the visit and automatically drafts the clinical note in real time. One of the most painful operational failures mentioned in the lesson is pajama time charting.
Working off the clock.
That's where providers spend their evenings, sometimes until 10 p.m., typing up medical records at home. It destroys their personal lives and causes massive burnout.
I don't deny that reducing pajama time charting is a massive benefit to providers' mental health.
But think about the patient in the room. Without ambient AI, the provider spends half the visit staring at a laptop, typing furiously to capture the data.
Yeah, the dreaded screen stare.
Ambient AI removes the keyboard from the room entirely. The doctor can sit down, look the patient directly in the eye, hold their hand, and just talk, while the AI does the administrative heavy lifting in the background. Automation isn't replacing the human connection. It is rescuing it from the crushing administrative burden we've built over the last 20 years.
Rescuing it for the doctor, perhaps, but my concern is the overarching trend of the system. The text literally states, quote, portals shift work to the patient.
It empowers them.
We are asking sick, vulnerable, exhausted people to navigate complex digital front doors, fill out their own data arrays, and interact with predictive algorithms before they can access a human being. The technology undeniably makes the operational engine more efficient, but we have to be incredibly vigilant that we aren't just building a highly efficient digital fortress that keeps the human reality of the patient at arm's length.
Well, I think it's time we summarize our positions. Throughout this discussion, I've maintained that operational efficiency and clinical excellence are not opposing forces.
Right.
In fact, strong, measured operations built on clear, standard operating procedures, diligent revenue cycle management, and smart automation form the protective shell that allows the fragile clinical relationship to thrive.
The invisible engine.
Exactly. By mapping the 11-stage patient journey and ensuring the baton of clinical data is never dropped, operations prevent the chaos that harms patients and burns out staff. When the invisible engine runs smoothly, clinical care becomes sustainable, scalable, and safe.
And my position remains that while operational viability is undeniably necessary to keep the lights on and the clinic open, we must remain constantly vigilant against the dark side of efficiency.
The dystopian side.
Yes, the pursuit of operational perfection, the strict adherence to rigid financial KPIs like revenue per provider, and the increasing reliance on automated, non-human workflows carry a profound risk. We must ensure that we do not reduce the deeply human, unpredictable act of medical care to a mere manufacturing process.
It's a balance.
Needs of the individual sitting in front of us, the patient experience is fundamentally degraded.
Well, we certainly have areas of continued disagreement regarding how financial metrics and standardized templates impact the patient's feeling of being seen as an individual versus, a widget on an assembly line.
We definitely do. But I will gladly acknowledge a significant point of convergence between us, which is drawn directly from the Carentix Academy material. We both absolutely agree that operational chaos, undocumented workflows, dropped handoffs, and undefined ownership actively harms patients.
Yes, absolutely.
No one wins when a referral goes unworked or a critical medication is delayed because no one owned the prior authorization process.
Exactly. A total lack of structure is just as harmful to the human experience as an overly rigid, punishing structure. And I think that balance leaves the listener with a really fascinating dynamic to consider.
It really does.
There is immense value in examining healthcare through both of these lenses simultaneously, the clinical art and the operational science. I highly suggest our listeners explore the Carentix Academy material further to see how their own healthcare experiences, perhaps their own frustration sitting in waiting rooms or trying to decipher medical billing, are fundamentally shaped by these invisible engines.
Absolutely. I mean, the next time you visit a doctor, you won't just see the stethoscope or the prescription pad. You'll see the 11 stages of the patient journey operating all around you.
So think back to that brilliant clinician we talked about at the very beginning, the one delivering truly life-changing care. Is that clinician being slowly suffocated by the chaos of a failing administrative system? Or are they being elevated by an invisible engine that ensures their brilliance actually reaches the people who need it most?
It is the fundamental balance every practice has to strike every single day.
Thank you for joining us for our discussion today, and we'll leave you to draw your own conclusions.